streams louder.
We're back. It's the next day. Tired as all can be, buddy. A little tired. We got some music playing in the background, so Charles is gonna love that. It's Thursday. It's about 10 in the morning. Got home last night. I think I went to bed about 3. What time did you go to bed, Charles?
1:30.
How'd you go to bed at 1:30?
We got back to the house at 1:30.
And you just instantly went to bed. So we're here, and then I think today we're gonna hear this thing rip. I hope. I don't know what we're waiting on. Trevor's not here yet. Probably a few more parts, but I think it's definitely feasible to have this thing at least attempting to run today. We need to run fuel lines, basically the engine harness, the Holly. But other than that, most of the big stuff is done, other than Garrett finishing up the cage and welding the exhaust and intercooler piping. So we'll see what happens. So this is the subframe connector. Basically, it's kind of a cheaper, more generic kit, obviously, so you're gonna have to make it work. So basically, this bolts on the bottom side of the chassis, obviously where the seat bracket bolts are, and this runs and basically connects the front frame rail or subframe to the rear frame rail or subframe, whatever you wanna call it. Weld on kit, they send it painted, belligerent. So I basically ground off the paint. Now right here we have some weld through primer. We're gonna spray it that way. Once you get it up there, you can weld through this, but also it seals the metal so you prevent rust in the future. Beautiful. Okay, boss.
I'd love to film a clip.
I'd love for you guys to film a clip so I can turn the music off. I'll go over here and I'll just off and you guys can do your thing. Actually, you know what I can do is I actually can off. Watch this. So I'll see you guys later.
Go ahead.
It is the next day. We went home. You guys have already been going ahead here. I ran around town this morning. I went and got registration, insurance for the Mustang, registration for the trailer. Then I went and refilled the argon bottle because we didn't have enough for the MIG welder to finish welding and stuff. So I did that. I went and picked up a bunch of parts at the parts store. I got some stuff shipped to my house. I got fuel. I got things for the trailer. I got a fitting, a super important fitting right here for the fuel tank. If you call like a hydraulic place and you're like, hey, I need a 6-and fitting or an 8-and fitting, they're like, huh? If you tell them you need a 3/8 ORB to a 1/2-inch ITF or whatever, a male, female, it's a 6-and thing adapter. So now we have our 6-and return and our 8-and feed out of the tank. That means we need to make lines now. And my goal for doing this is I'm just gonna take the whole roll of the Deechworks lines. I'm gonna make the fittings right here, and then I'm just gonna run them underneath the car. Then we're just gonna cut them and basically form them in place. We'll get the fuel tank up in there officially, and then we'll have the long lines just to run wherever we need to run them. So you guys have ever wondered how to make AN lines? This stuff is pretty simple. Sometimes the PTFE stuff is a little bit more complicated, but I'd highly recommend one of these tools right here. Vibrant actually sells these things. We actually have this on motionalperformance.com, but this is a nice cutter, and you have to make sure you get the one with the little rocker on there. I got one from Harbor Freight, and it just frays the ends. Like it's not thick enough.
Snapchat girl Snapchats me, love you. I say not thick enough.
And it doesn't have enough girth to get like a nice like chop. You could also chop the ones with the rubber with just an angle grinder, and then you just have to make sure that clean it out. This end right here is a little frayed, so it's kind of hard to get that fitting on it. So I'm just gonna take this guy right here, right at the very end, give it a nice little chop. Now you can see how it's kind of like squished in. Give it a little squeeze, stick this fitting in there. You'll run it all the way until it hits the threads. So there we go. And then you need a little bit of lubricant. A good old PV blaster. Basically what you do is put a little bit of this on the threads. I got the flow control on, so a little bit of that, a little bit of it kind of on the rubber down there. It just helps it kind of glide into the thing a little bit better. Also, a set of these jaws for the vise is really nice. So they're magnetic and they just kind of sit in there. And then you don't mar up your beautiful Deechworks AN fittings. I think this is the combo. Like I like these fittings. They just look good. They're silver, they're not red and black. So just get that pinched in there real nice. And then basically just take that fitting, stick it in. The Deechworks ones just seem really nice. I've used cheap ones, I've used really expensive ones. The Deechworks ones are like the best feeling ones that I've got. So if you guys are interested in some Deechworks fuel stuff, they have a full website where they sell everything. We'll ship it directly to you, or Motion Auto Performance will ship it directly to your door as well. I need a crescent wrench. Another nice thing about the silver fittings is that if you do end up using like a crescent wrench or something on them and you scratch it, it's already silver. So you can't really see it. It's not like you have a purple or a blue or a black fitting to like mess up in your engine bay. There we go. That's it. Now I'm gonna use this whole line. I'm just gonna take this whole thing and I'm gonna hook it up to the fuel thing and we're gonna stick the fuel tank in there. So now we're doing it with 8-and stuff. And you'll notice the bigger the line size, the easier it is to do. So if you're doing 10-and stuff, it's easy. If you're doing 6-and, it's not bad. 4N is kind of hard because it's like a little bit smaller. PTFE stuff is a little bit more complicated, but honestly the PTFE is like a lot better because it's like a nylon liner, so it won't get degraded with E85 or anything like that. But you know, these things are going to be great for a while because we're going to run E85. We're going to run everything in these things.
So we just got done with the subframe connectors, basically these two pieces of channel. Basically just weld the, as you can see, the front subframe and the rear are basically unattached, unibody car. So this basically attaches those, makes them one unit, and makes the structure of the car that much stronger. So basically took them, kind of made them fit. They're more generic, so made them fit to the car as best as we could, and then just took and welded both ends of both sides, and then they bolt up right here where the seat bracket is. We'll have to change some stuff with that down the road once we get the seats in there. Probably run bolts in from the top, put nuts in the bottom, but for now they're just kind of hanging out there. But so that's all done. Now Trevor's running the fuel lines.
So now that Sean's done with subframe connectors, it is time to run the fuel lines. Fuel tank is up in here, officially bolted. The lines are all tight and everything. We have the fuel power and ground ran up into the car, so we'll be able to wire into that later. So right now I'm basically just taking my long fuel lines. This is the return, so this should be pretty simple. Pretty much just run this straight up front, right above the axle. Stick that above right there, and then
we'll tidy this up later.
we're basically gonna figure out the best place to run it, whether it's on the side of the subframe connector that Sean just ran, because that kind of gives it a little bit of protection. Obviously this is gonna go up like here, so you can see where the axle goes. This is pretty much where the OEM fuel lines went, or we could actually even pop up right here. So just in case the axle bottoms out, fuel lines are protected. They go straight up there, right along the fuel rail, right next to the brake line. I mean, that's pretty much OEM style right there. Along the subframe connector, that will keep us away from stuff. Subframe connector should kind of protect it a little bit. I don't know if we go up above the tranny mount.
Whatever way it can be pinned up and not drag on the ground.
I think above. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Here, you wanna feed it back and then I'll pull it?
There's two holes right here too. You can zip
Oh yeah, 2 peak clamps right there. Fuel system, done. All right, so right now I'm getting ready to mount the fuel filter. Oh,
So this is an LS1 style water pump. Basically we did that so both of the water necks come out forward, so they're not coming up in the way and stuff. So we have the LS1 style water pump basically with spacers, so it puts it in the same location as the factory truck water pump basically. But like I said, it's just for the reasoning behind getting both of the inlet and outlet coming forward in the same direction. So
the other one just comes up.
Yeah.
And it's like a little bit taller than the radiator, so.
This way we don't have an issue with air in the system and stuff like that, a lot easier to bleed. So.
Trevor's working on the fuel system. Hold up the fuel line right there. Marking it where he wants to cut it off.
Drop it down, cut it.
Sean, what are you working on?
I'm going to start getting the harness on the motor.
And then in the back right here, Garrett is hunched over. Well, then the last part's at the rear of the cage. How you feeling?
Warm.
Yeah.
Warm. Good thing I'm not claustrophobic.
It's almost a perfect fit.
Right?
It's a Garrett-sized trunk.
So we're putting on the wiring harness for the Holley Terminator X Max right now, and this thing, it's awesome. Every clip, every plug is labeled. We got knock sensors, injectors. So there's a separate injector harness. Every injector is labeled. Simple plug-and-play setup. So I'm excited to get this thing all wired up, all cleaned up, nice looking, and get the ECU plugged in and see if we can get this thing fired up here soon. So
He knows how nice this is because when we were doing the Ranger Challenge, he literally took the OEM harness, cut it down and made a standalone harness to the stock ECU. Whereas this thing, it's all brand new, all plug and play, like labeled, plugs in.
Are you stoked?
yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
All right guys, so we have a radiator right here. So this is a Frostbite LS Swap dual pass aluminum radiator, which is like a big dog. This thing's gonna be making lots of juice. We're gonna be driving it on the road. We need to keep it cool, and this should do it. So we have 16 AN ORB ports on each side. I actually have a fitting that we need to weld on there because I couldn't find any of these available to 1.5 inches. They're actually back ordered. So I got new brackets, new bushings for the bottom of it, and we have a shroud that bolts on this thing too. But for now, we're just gonna stick it in there. So Gary's over here working on the door bars.
Cutting a little bit of length out of them, making it work for a couple changes we made.
Essentially the rocker bars and the door bars were a little bit longer because I mean, obviously you could set them different lengths and heights and stuff, but they were like almost like an inch longer. Like an inch.
It was like two
inches longer. So Gary's getting that stuff fitted right now. Sean has the engine harness completely on the engine, everything ready to go. So now we have everything from the Holly right here. Now we need to get all of this stuff, pull it back into the chassis,
So this runs up here to
and
the plug.
run
So
this into the car and plug it into the ECU. And then in the back, I actually did the fuel pump relay. Come on. I basically used this factory grommet right there to go through the fuel tank so we don't have anything coming up. And then I used a relay. This is 12 volt. This should go to the battery. And then we will use this brown as the signal from the ECU to trigger the relay, and the Holly will trigger the relay. Prime pulse it once, and then it'll only turn on the fuel pump when we're cranking. But if we're just sitting there and like, let's say the car dies, it'll kill that. And then we'll set up some parameters in there where it like kills the fans and stuff to where like it doesn't drain the battery if we're just sitting there with the key on, ignition on. So
How are you feeling about meeting the deadline?
I don't know, it's 6:40 Thursday. I would like to be doing some dyno stuff, or at least tuning this thing tomorrow sometime. I mean, ultimately, like, it would be sick if we would be able to get this thing started tonight. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe, I mean, it might be. We might be really close. One of the other things that we need to do is figure out how to give the chassis power. So like headlights, taillights, brake lights, all that stuff, power windows. There's so much stuff missing from this thing, the factory ECU. We do have the factory key in here, but there's a lot of stuff that we took out of the engine bay. There is like a relay box up underneath the dash, but I've never messed with a Foxbody before, so I don't know how to wire one of these things like a race car. We're gonna get to that eventually. All right guys, so we're moving on. Sean is wiring the car. I decided we need to get this hot-sided welded up. Garrett's finishing up getting all the cage mocked up so it's ready to start welding on it. But in the meantime, he wasn't using the welder. This thing is a big part of kind of moving forward with a lot of other things. So as soon as we get this welded, put it in the car, and then we start mounting the turbo, figuring out intercooler piping and stuff like that. Get her done. See how my welds turn out.
Doing great so far.
Not bad so far. So we have a random assortment of intercooler piping pieces. Pretty much that's what we start every project with, is just that, and then we cut it, weld it, we make it work. Found this piece. This is the first piece I pulled out of the box. Turbo is basically gonna be chilling right here, and then we're gonna come out of that. Probably for like a 90, or maybe we need to swap this for a 90, and then we just come out of that, and then a coupler done. Hey, Garrett, the hot side of the intercooler is done right here.
90 coupler you're talking about? Right into that?
90 coupler, or we have a coupler.
We're gonna need a coupler there regardless. Might as well make it a 90. If the depth is right.
Bam, done. Cold side. Let's see what we're working with. We're now in the, I think we're getting, Garrett, are we in the Trevi's custom stage of the build or no? No? Okay. So I just need to shorten that a little bit. Shorten this leg. Come around like right there. Kick up with maybe a 45, almost kind of straight-ish. The 90 deal up there. Intercooler piping is gonna be a breeze. Right now, Garrett is finishing up a couple little, when you finish a weld and you don't like give it an extra dab and then like slowly back off the pedal. I wasn't doing that. So he's kind of going and fixing a couple little spots. As soon as he finishes over there on the bench, finishing my little pinholes, he's gonna go ahead and weld these guys right there. Spent a little bit of time, got basically the coping all nice on those, so he's gonna end up welding these guys, the rocker bar and the door bar. After that's all done, then look at that mess of wiring we got. So like, I don't know if we keep that. At this point, like if we give certain things power, then we have headlights, taillights, blinkers, hopefully. Going to these powers at fuse box. So we give the fuse box power, wherever that comes from.
The prodigal son returns.
Prodigal son. Nick, do you have any wire?
What kind of wire?
Like 10 gauge? Maybe like.
Find out.
Hot side is in the car. Look at that. It's in. It's V-banded. We have an oil line. We have the drain line almost kind of ready. We got the Garrett wastegate welded on the top, welded by Garrett himself inside. We figured out some intercooler piping. Now we got to figure out a little bit of an exhaust. I figure we're just gonna take this unit right here, cut it right in the middle of the 90, cut it right in the middle of that, so we have a 90, and then probably cut it in the middle of that 90 and have 245s, and then kick it over and then up. I think is the idea. So I gotta get to cutting. Good morning, boys. We are back at the shop. We got a little bit of sleep. We're over here doing it. So check this out. This morning, I stopped at O'Reilly's, got some radiator hoses. The custom radiator things worked perfectly. Then came over here to the turbo setup, and I made me a custom drain line. Look at that, 10 AN, 45 degree out, 90 degree going right there with some heat sleeve, looking beautiful. I also got a new bolt. You guys didn't even know we needed this, but we needed a bolt like this, M10 by 1.5 by 150 mil. Went to the local agricultural store, got some of that. So we need to space out some of this stuff for that thing. We need to work on a downpipe. Right now, I am messing with the radiator fan, getting that all hooked up. I just want to get like the cooling system complete, then move on to the turbo, start messing with the intercooler piping and all that stuff. Sean is working on getting it wired, and then fuel system is done. Put some fuel in it, weld some things. Garrett still needs to weld a couple things on the cage. So right now, it is 11:40, I guess, in the morning. It's almost noon, and everybody is already on their way. Everybody's on their way to the race week. There's a block party that happens at 4 o'clock today, and we are 5.5 hours away. Obviously, we're not gonna make it to that. So tomorrow is Tech-in is from 11:30 until 2:30 at the track. Again, like I said, 5.5 hour drive. That means in order to make the last part of the drive, or to make it there, we should probably leave at like 7 in the morning, no matter what. As of right now, we have until 7 in the morning to get this thing done, get a little bit of sleep. We gotta pack the car, we gotta pack the trailer, we gotta put a windshield in it. Like the more I talk about it, the more I realize how many things. But we're just gonna keep checking off the list. One of the things that I highly recommend, because I've done this before, is when you are doing a last minute build like this, if you put something on the car, tighten it. Like, don't say I'm gonna go back and check it later or nut and bolt, because you won't. If you put it on there, tighten it like all the way. If you need to take it back off, loosen it all the way, because I've ran into that before. But turbo is officially on. Tight, things are tight. We're working through it. We got this heat shield right here, or this that little unit. So fan is gonna go on. Sean's gonna wire that thing up as well. We need to put oil in it. We need to put tranny fluid in it. We got things. We got some things.
Hey.
So tell me how you feeling.
Hot, tired, sweaty, in pain. My legs are killing me. And this is gonna make that a lot better too.
All right, so we're kind of mapping out the intercooler piping at this point. We kind of took a shift off of the roll cage, because if we can get all this done, welded, and moving on, then we can kind of start dialing in, electrical, ECU, like all of that other stuff that's going to kind of be dependent on this stuff. We can do all this, and they can shift over to what they need to support this with. I'll move back to the cage. Hopefully we all cross the finish line at the same time.
So I'm just welding the up pipe, but essentially since the material is so thick, there's no weight on the back of this, is not holding anything. I'm just basically just fusing the metal together. I'm not even using a filler rod. Got some good fit up on here. It's going pretty well. It's really fast too, because you don't have to worry about dabbing, or you just kind of go. You just flow the puddle and let it work its magic. So we're making some progress on the car. Got the up pipe. Garrett is messing with the
O2 sensor.
Yeah. So we're doing something with the O2 sensor to give it, with a 4-inch pipe and it being so close to the outside, sometimes when it's idling, Holly or the wideband will not register, just because, it's kind of like...
There's a lot of turbulence in there. It wants to escape. It has no desire to be read by the O2 sensor.
So it'll probably be like, until we're like doing a pull or like, 10% throttle, then it starts to read the O2 sensor correctly. But we want it to read the O2 sensor correct most of the time. Yeah. So what we're actually gonna do, let's see it.
Yeah, let me grab that tube real quick and roll. So essentially we took some exhaust tube that we had, some smaller stuff from another project. We're actually gonna be mounting the O2 sensor in this, and then we'll be feeding it inside there, basically facing the exducer, so that the O2 sensor is reading basically on a 2-inch exhaust. It'll think it is basically reading a 2-inch exhaust, so kind of help to steady what the O2 sensors are gonna read. Because it being so short, there's gonna be a lot of turbulence in there, and just anything we can do to kind of steady that out, it's gonna do a lot to help tuning.
So now we're moving on. Sean is wiring on the inside. We actually ran out of argon, or pretty much ran out of argon, so we had a buddy take the bottle and go get an exchange real quick. About 4:30 on a Friday night. And everybody is in Great Bend, Kansas right now at the block party, and we're here. We haven't even started this thing yet. We need to put a windshield in it. I couldn't find anybody to do it, but the glass company that I called, they were able to order the windshield. So I have a brand new windshield for it, but since we have the cage right here, obviously I want to get it painted first. So I'm gonna go ahead and scuff this up real quick, get it cleaned off, and basically just paint this piece of the cage so that way it's painted and we don't have to pull the windshield out later to try and paint the cage or have a rusty cage, which I really don't want a rusty cage.
So yeah, basically the engine setup is pretty much wired in the car other than switched ignition. But we also need to incorporate headlights, taillights, turn signals and all that into the vehicle, obviously, because it's not just a race car, it's going to be driven from event to event. So pretty much know on the harness what we need as far as the plugs and stuff that go for that. Me and Garrett are going to take all of the loom off this thing. It's all old and crusty, and then kind of just start pulling stuff out as we realize we don't need it. So it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be a perfect or maybe even painless process. But we'll go ahead.
Saw some primer on this windshield over here. Now I gotta use the little caulking gun, spit me out a bead on the windshield. Should be good to go.
All right, so we've kind of gotten through the point of doing all the intercooler piping. I think we're fully done, and this is the last time they can go in. We're gonna kind of give it a fit, make sure we're good on this side. This side has the V-band, it's a little bit more sensitive. Yeah, I think we're tight there.
Oh my goodness. Look at that.
Way to be. All right,
fire.
That side's good. This side was a little bit interesting. This is the cold side. We still have to drill and do the blow-off valve, but we were totally in a pinch and didn't have a source for a 3/8 pipe bung. What I ended up doing is building up some weld material in there, and then we drilled it out. We didn't have the 9/16 bit that we needed either, so I kind of had to do that by hand. All worked out pretty well. Now we at least have our intake air temp sensor. Everything worked out pretty good at that.
So that's a hand-built bung.
There you go. Built up out of weld material. Bring that top one.
Beautiful. Great job.
So now,
Thank you.
that means our charge piping is complete. We just need to drill that thing, put the blow-off valve on it. She's ready to rip.
That's our fit. So
Now Garrett just needs to come out with blow-off valves. So we can have Garrett turbo, Garrett exhaust housing, Garrett wastegate, and Garrett blow-off valve.
good idea.
Well, Garrett, what happened?
I think we tripped a breaker. Too much grinding, cutting, all that nonsense. Too much power going out trying to make this happen.
Hey, we're back.
So we have a kind of a small temporary tranny cooler right now. It goes right here, just so we could get something in it so that way we could drive it. I think with the new transmission harness, it will actually read transmission temp. We have this other cooler right here. It's kind of a big one. Just packaging, trying to get it, because I didn't really want to put it in front of the intercooler and then like to the side. Foxbody bumpers don't really have a lot of airflow that goes through them. So like if I put this, let's say over here, there's not really that much airflow that's gonna hit it, but a bunch of like, let's say debris from the tires and stuff will hit it. Kind of the same thing with the oil cooler. So I'm kind of having a dilemma on what we could do. I would kind of like an oil cooler, but where the hell do we put it? Maybe right here in the center, like I said.
Full stance and just out the bumper.
Out the bumper.
Mounted on the bumper.
Out in front of it.
I'm in.
I mean, here's the dilemma with the oil cooler. It's too big to fit here. We could probably do something with it like right here. I mean, we could do that. Honestly, that's not bad, but then it kind of has to go up because it's in front of the bash bar, but then right here, will the bumper get in the way of that?
Yeah.
So you can't turn it sideways, so the fitting's going or pointing downward.
So, and I was thinking we could put it in there.
Yeah.
Like that?
I mean, honestly, we can almost leave it like that.
Just mount it up?
Like it.
Honestly, the volume alone and the hoses will do something better than having nothing.
right, guys, so we are chugging along, plucking along, doing whatever you want to call it. It's 11:37 p.m. We're supposed to leave at 5 in the morning, 5.5 hours away, and it hasn't sat on the ground yet. The Blakes are bred.
The Blakes are bred?
The brakes are bled. The turbo's on, wastegate's on. We need to run some vacuum lines, all that stuff. Alternator's on, not hooked up. Sean is putting in the headlights. We have all of the intercooler piping completed. We have the oil cooler, the transmission cooler hooked up. There's no oil in it. There's no oil in the transmission, but we have the Terminator X plugged into it. It's the first time I've ever messed with one. So kind of going through stuff in the menus while the guys are doing some other stuff. Garrett is actually working on welding in the final 2 bars into the cage, which I'd like to show you guys. So come on with me. Sean put the Terminator X up here. Got this nice bracket from Holly. It was actually supposed to go under the seat, so like underneath the seat of the Foxbody. Since we basically stripped the whole interior out of here, we just put it right there. I really like it. This is basically a key-on ignition, little fuse panel right there. Everything is ran to the factory key on the ignition switch, so we get key on, accessory, all that stuff right there. Hey Sean, do the power windows work? They will. So we're gonna have power windows, which is gonna be nice. Garrett is just gonna do these 2 down bars that go right here. I painted a little bit of the cage earlier, and I also put the windshield in it. So making some progress, doing some things. Sean's wiring looks good. Let's show him the battery in the back. So Sean went ahead, put the battery right here in the back. It has some cables running over here. This right here is the main battery. We have a shutoff switch right here. So at the track, that's one of the things that you need if you relocate your battery anywhere other than the front of the firewall. We got the fuel pump relay and everything over here all hooked up. The wiring, Sean put some nice lube and stuff on it to go up front. Really proud of how far this car's come in literally just a couple days. We have a lot of work still left to do. I was mocking up the trailer hitch a little bit ago. So you can see we got the trailer hitch right there. I have one bracket made for it, and we're gonna have to tie that up a little bit further into the frame. The wheels and tires are on it, and the brakes are bled. Now we pretty much need to put fuel in it, oil, transmission fluid, load a tune from the Holly, and we can turn the key and see if she runs. Turn the ignition power off and on before starting the engine. Okay,
Are we about to start the engine? Fuel pump's working.
Look, do we got fuel pressure? 60 pounds of fuel pressure. It's perfect. It's what we need. I think we're getting ready to start this thing for the first time. Holly tune is loaded in, and we scaled the injectors, scaled the map sensor. Had to rescale the map sensor because we had the wrong map sensor in it, or I bought a 4-bar but it doesn't plug in. That might be an issue right there because we can't even run boost at this point. It's just NA. So key is on. We have not tried cranking it. We haven't done anything. This is going to be the first crank. So let's see what it does. It has fuel pressure. It has things. Here we go. Let's see what it does. Anything? 19 pounds. I wonder if it has ignition.
We'll be right back.
To run an engine, you need fuel, air, and spark. Should have compression. Feels like it has compression. Doesn't smell like fuel, so it's probably not getting fuel. We have fuel pressure, so there may be an issue with it not sending fuel, and it also doesn't sound like it's getting spark. So when we were cranking it on the RPM signal, it said syncing when you were cranking it, so it wasn't even giving us like a cranking signal. That means that something is up with our crank or cam signal. Yeah. I wonder if we should spray a little bit of starting fluid in there. See if it's just like, okay, there's braking right there. All right, guys. So what is a couple seconds to you guys has been about 2.5 hours of pulling hair, trying to figure things out. So I wasn't able to get really in the car or diagnose it because as soon as we kind of figured out that it didn't start, Garrett hopped back in there and was just finishing welding the cage because it was already like 1 o'clock in the morning at that point. Right now it's 4. It just clicked over 4 o'clock in the morning for me. After like another hour of messing with the car, the whole time Garrett was welding inside the cage, I was searching online. Everybody who I know who messes with these things is currently asleep. I think at this point, like, we should be hopping in the car and driving there right now to make tech and do everything. I don't know. I think we're calling it, boys. I don't know. I don't know if old Duke was set out to make this journey.